Hello. Good? Thank you. All right. Audible in the back? Good to go? Okay, thank you. So thank you for the lovely introduction, and thank you to David and Darren for having myself and Helium here at the meetup. We are part of something else that was happened at Capital Factory about 2 to 3 months ago, specifically around blockchain. Not so much about the Helium platform, so it's good to be back. Um, my name is Mark Phillips. I run business development and customer success at Helium. How many people had heard of Helium before signing up for this meetup? Cool, okay. And then David kind of got into this when he was asking about what people are hiring for and what kind of jobs and work they're looking for, but I always like to ask what the kind of makeup of the crowd is. So who is doing, I mean, we heard embedded development, so people are doing embedded development, um, actively building IoT products, connected products, at least one person, UI, UX stuff, what else? Anybody specifically, in love with wireless, or in love and then hate and then in love with wireless, generally? Okay. Like to be? You might love to hate it. Yeah, it's a very easy thing to love to hate. Cool. Okay. Anybody focus on blockchain? One. Okay. Cool. Great. So this talk is going to cover a bunch of stuff. It's not going to get wildly technical, but I'm happy to go there either via questions or kind of after the talk. I've also brought Robert Keith here with me, who is one of our lead hardware engineers. So he's very much in the weeds on building all of the hardware components I'm going to talk about and a lot of the wireless pieces that I'm going to talk about. So I'm going to make some things up and then kick it over to him on the very technical side when we have to go deep on things like DSPs and PRUs and all that good stuff. Cool, okay. So, I mean, the talk will probably run 20, 25 minutes. Happy to take questions during it. And then, yeah, let's have some fun. So, a bit on the background of Helium. So we were founded a long time ago, although we still very much consider ourselves a startup. So founded in 2013 with a mission to really make a network that is ideal for low cost, long range data. Actually, definitely want to hear more about your use case, because I think we're going to be right in your sweet spot. And we've got a fantastic roster of companies backing us. Sadly, nobody from Austin just yet, but Digital Garage, Munich Re, which is the largest global reinsurance company in the world with some fantastic IoT use cases. Slow Ventures, Google Ventures, SV Angel, First Mark Capital out of New York, Mark Benioff of Salesforce, and Cosa Ventures. So we've got a lot of big guns in our corner. And we've raised, I think, 3 rounds of funding, seed A and B, up to end of 2015 was the last time we raised money. So, more importantly, we are here to talk about what Helium sees as this massive problem, which is that it is entirely too hard to connect devices to the internet, still now. Helium was founded in 2013, so I think 6 years ago at this point, actually. I joined just after we were founded, so I've been there for 5 years. And we're still trying to solve the same exact problem that we were funded to solve at the time. And so we've gone through this kind of massive path to get to where we are. So I can talk about the different iterations of our platform, but we started actually with something that looks quite similar to what we have now, just in a lot of different ways. So I'm going to pass this around a little bit later. This is the Helium hotspot. Before it was called a gateway. We've had previous versions of this, and we've improved on in a ton of ways. But we were founded, again, to start this big public wireless network. And then we got into these use cases where we were working with large companies who were trying to deploy connected temperature sensors, HVAC systems, smart agriculture, mobility use cases. And we would get into these kind of very small, constrained, successful scenarios, and then hit a wall when people were required to scale up past what would end up being like a local network, right? It can work fine on a factory floor. It might work fine on 10 acres of farm. But when the end customer is required to deploy their own network and kind of maintain it, that's where things fall apart. So what we consistently saw in and out year over year was that the network just wasn't there to suit what the use cases were. So today what we have is a smattering of everything. We've got cellular networks, we've got NB-IoT, we've got narrowband things, we've got LP-WAN technologies, we've got Zigbee and all the 15.4 family, we've got Wi-Fi and Halo and Bluetooth LE and all these crazy things. On the long-range connectivity case or use case, cellular networks are really trying to pull away. But we're of the opinion that their technology just isn't good enough. we've got a small set of players, the telcos, who are trying to basically pull people into this world where they control all the connectivity with similar business plans and a closed business model. And about 18 months ago, we went back to the drawing board and said, this is just not going to cut it. We can't make our customers successful. We really have to kind of go all in. And so I'm going to talk about kind of the changes that we made to the platform. So when we look at the sort of devices that need to connect to the internet now and the technology that's required to kind of make them successful, Helium looks at things like, years of battery life. So I forgot what you said your name was, sir. Paul, right? So when you're looking at your device that's going to go on a Serena Williams or something, how long do you expect this thing to last in the field? Oh, okay, that's not bad. Terrible example. That's a bad example for what I'm going after. But let's say you want to put a temperature sensor in the middle of a field, right? That's going to look at temperature of a field plus soil conditions. You don't want to send anybody out there any more than once every 6 months, 12 months, 18 months if possible. So we're looking for years of battery life on an extremely small battery. You need a tiny form factor. I've got some hardware that I'm going to hand out here. This is a Helium development board. On this development board is the Helium module, which is only about 13 by 13 millimeters. That's literally all you need to build a fully connected device with a processor for sensor applications, and your radio, and your crypto stack, and a nice embedded environment that this guy Robert and the team work on. 13 by 13 millimeters. That's crazy. We're building things like smart connected caps that go on top of vials. So form factor is a massive requirement for these things. Did you have a question? This is a Featherwing. This is the development board. Yeah, I'm going to pass this around. This is the Helium Featherwing dev board. On this dev board is our module. So this is just made for prototyping or building things in production if they're big enough. People need location tracking without GPS. So who's built a thing that you've built something with GPS? Would it be nice if you were not encumbered by GPS? Yeah. Right. I had never ridden a scooter before. I live in Boston. We haven't authorized scooters to be on the streets yet. San Francisco has a few. I haven't had a chance to use them yet. I am in love with those things. If you hate them, I apologize. It was one of the greatest trips up and down the street I've ever had. The location data on those things are terrible. And those companies, does anybody work for a scooter company or have looked into the economics of how scooters are functioning and if they're making or losing money? They're not making money just yet. They are. It's going to get better. Companies like Helium are going to help with the problem. I'll talk a lot about the tracking use case, but envision a world where you don't need GPS to get very accurate location data off of a 13 by 13 millimeter square. Pretty cool. Miles of range, right? So rural areas. Imagine, for us, one of the use cases I'm going to talk about is a smart agriculture use case. A company called Agulus, which is going into farms in the south. Agulus, A-G-U-L-U-S. Nope, not that one. No. So this company builds irrigation monitoring system for non-row cropping farms. So not corn, but things like pecans and peaches. And so they're building wireless infrastructure on top of Helium, and they can deploy, one of these to cover like 100 square miles, which is pretty massive, right? It's a very small piece of hardware. I'll talk about what it costs and what it takes to build it. But if you've got, 10 farms, 10 of these at a cost of 450 US, and you cover the entire thing, pretty good deal. So it needs miles of range, and the network has to be able to support that. And then lastly, we're adamant about the fact that it has to have non-proprietary technology. Every single telco is using things that is, encumbered by patents, and they're paying huge royalties to Qualcomm. There's some new LPWAN players. So LPWAN is low power wide area networks for people who aren't as deep in the wireless stuff as we are. So that's that's the Heliums, but that's also the LoRa's and the Sigfoxes of the worlds and the Weightlesses. And there's 2 or 3 other ones. Everything except for Helium is entirely protected by what looks like a traditional royalty regime. So we don't think that that's the way to do it. We're building a network actively that is made to run without Helium's intervention. Our goal is to build this decentralized wireless network such that we could, if ever we wanted to, kind of walk away from the thing after it's deployed and running, and everybody would be able to continue using it, and I'll get into how we're going to do that. So what we're at now is on the cusp of rolling out the Helium network. So it is an open, decentralized, cryptographic wireless network. And for us, this is really the culmination of the last 18 months of rebuilding the platform towards those 5 bullet points that I just talked about. Giving you longer battery life, miles of range, non-proprietary technology, GPS-free location, and a tiny form factor. So the Helium network is the embodiment. Actually, Robert and I were down here in Austin to give this talk, but also to work with a few of our customers and early deployers, a few of whom are in this room tonight, and get them up and running on the early version of our network, and really start to get into why Austin's going to be one of the biggest cities for us. Which I can also get into. So you're probably asking yourself, how is a company like Helium selling, small pieces of hardware going to cover the world in this crazy new wireless network? So we had one person here familiar with blockchain. Has anybody else read up on it enough to feel dangerous? Okay, so we're building an incentive-built network. So 18 months ago, like I said, we went back to the drawing board and said, we've done thousands of POCs with everybody from startups to Fortune 10 enterprises. And we kept seeing this theme that unless a network were to exist, we couldn't succeed. So how do we build a massive network without having tens of billions of dollars a year to spend on capital expenses to put towers up on every single building, maintain those towers, expand our tower space? So the answer for us was to come up with a mechanism by which we could incentivize people to build network for us. And so we said, oh, well, this blockchain thing is kind of crazy. Let's think about it for a few minutes. And we did this, and we laughed at it, and we kind of threw it out the window. And we came back to it 3 or 4 other times, and then eventually somebody wrote a white paper internally on this. If you go to, there's going to be links up at the end of this, but at helium.com, we've got a link to our white paper, which lays out all of the technology that kind of underpins this. That's version 50 of the white paper. We went through a lot of these. And so we came up with this system whereby we incentivize you, and I hope some or all of you in this room will take part in this. We incentivize consumers. It could be a consumer who doesn't care about actual IoT data, or it could be somebody who actually is deploying devices and wants to create coverage for them. One of our customers in Austin, Stay Alfred, is doing that. Deploy Helium hotspots. So here. And in exchange for deploying that, there's a blockchain that runs on these hotspots and also runs in the Helium cloud infrastructure and compensates people for running that. And the beautiful part about this, and this talk wasn't really to get too deep into the blockchain, but I'm kind of happy to do it. As the network gets larger, the network actually gets stronger because the blockchain running on these hotspots is responsible for actually verifying the integrity of the network that surrounds it geographically. So, one of these, we'll go to the hotspot page here. So this is, we'll get into some specs on the Helium hotspot. So, had anybody read anything about this before? I know a few people had looked at Helium. Okay, so this is, I don't know what version of this. I mean, this is version 5 of this specific unit, but we've had probably 20 different hardware units that look somewhat like this that do kind of wireless coverage. We used to be in the, anybody ever work with like 802.15.4? Anything? Yeah, so the first version of our gateway, we called it a gateway, was built on 802.15.4, but that sort of wireless range was not going to cut it for the sort of application that we needed. So we went back to the drawing board, designed this new hotspot, and we designed it around a radio module, and I'm going to pass this around the room. Actually, I can pass this around now if people want to look at this. So this is the development board. I'm sorry, I told you I wouldn't walk around, but I did. So that's the development board. In the middle, there's something called the TI-1352P, which is a sub-gigahertz wireless transceiver with a M4 processor and a lot of other stuff, as the RF hardware engineer says. So the center module is all you need to connect to a network built of these. And so the protocol that uses to transmit data is a new protocol that we're going to be releasing in the next couple months, which uses a handful of open known modulation techniques for sending data using publicly accessible sub-gigahertz wireless spectrum. And so we built this hotspot to be 2 things in parallel, a blockchain miner and a wireless access point. So on the blockchain mining front, this runs a Helium blockchain and is constantly performing mining operations, pumping transactions into blocks and pushing them out. And again, I can go into the specifics of the blockchain, but it might just kind of take us on a divergence here. And then the wireless piece is built on a software-defined radio. Anybody ever done any work with software-defined radios or SDRs? Yeah, they're black magic as far as I'm concerned. And he's laughing and he knows about signal processing. This guy is deep in it as well. It is a fantastical sort of thing that can sit there and ingest a massive amount of, in our case, RF data. And then on the other side of this pipeline, it shows up as packets, right? And we push those packets over a backhaul back to the internet. So we've built a software-defined radio that is built on a very cheap component from a company called Lime Micro. There's a ton of innovation in this hotspot. And it's capable of processing roughly 300,000 packets per hour for one of these things. So it uses narrow band channels between 902 and 927 megahertz, which is part of the ISM band. And that's in the United States. And this thing can just process a stupid amount of sensor data, essentially. That's all you really need to take away from that for a very cheap price. So these are going to go on sale in May. I'm going to talk about our roadmap. Austin is our launch city, so we love Austin for a lot of reasons. We needed a city where we were likely to find people who were interested in IoT, in crypto, in blockchain, and who would want to be incentivized to put a $400 piece of hardware in their window and create wireless coverage. Austin was one of those cities for a variety of reasons. Question? It's lighter. It's not really a full node. So it's built on a Satara. So it's a dual core ARM, and then it's got about 4 gigs of storage. Yeah. So it's not big by any means. And so we have to do a lot of work to only keep the smallest amount of data on this thing. So there's a bunch of full nodes that run on the cloud side that keep the full blockchain up and running. On this, I mean, it's a Linux-based OS, and we can follow up after this, but we're using an embedded database called RocksDB. Yeah, and so we bounce between that and the other one that was at Basho when I worked at Basho. Let's talk about it after. But RocksDB, and Andrew's going to kill me. I was there when he wrote the thing. Anyways, it's essentially an embedded key value store. Is all it is. Yeah. Good. Okay. Okay. So let's talk a little bit more about how we reward hotspot operators or hosts that we call them. So hopefully when people leave here, they're going to be very motivated to go and register to be on the hotspot waitlist. What that will do is make sure that you get notified when these things are available to go on sale, which again should be mid to end of May. So the hotspot again is doing 2 very interesting things at the same time. It's being a blockchain miner for the Helium blockchain, and the Helium blockchain is something that we wrote from scratch specifically for devices and sensors in the real world. I can again go into all the specifics of why we went with something off the brand new versus off the shelf, like Ethereum or the Bitcoin blockchain or name your own blockchain. But we needed something that would specifically let us push something useful back into the network as the blockchain was doing its job. So with something like Bitcoin, you're just trying to solve a puzzle using hashes, and you're keeping time, and then every 10 minutes you pop out a new block. Or you generate you match the nonce, and then you pop out a new block. For us, we didn't want that, and that wasn't anything useful for us. So for us, what we did is we built this system called proof of coverage. And so proof of coverage dictates that hotspot 1 can sit in the same geographic area, or not in the same geographic area as hotspots 2 through n, and then constantly verify that those hotspots are actually providing valid network coverage. And so over time, we started to get a very good view of the network and the robustness of the network, and we call this proof of coverage. And so hotspots are constantly submitting proofs, and so they rise or fall in this kind of list of quality scores that we have across all these hotspots, and that makes them more likely or less likely to pull in mining rewards, or makes them more or less likely to be basically paid off for them managing the network on our behalf. So the hotspots are producing a utility token that is native to the Helium platform. And hotspot operators, I'm going to tempt the demo gods and do a live demo in a second. Manage all this through a wallet app on iOS or Android, and we have a desktop wallet that'll follow that too. So those are kind of the tenets of the network. I always like to pause here and see if anybody has any questions because I kind of covered a lot there. We're starting in the back. Yeah, so that is built on an environment called Tock, T-O-C-K, which is an open source project out of Berkeley. Robert can talk more about this. But you can write, what is it? C and, yeah, so C, C++, and I guess Rust would be the native languages you'd write, and then we'll wrap that with SDKs for things like Arduino, Raspberry Pi, Embed, things like that. Not embedded. No. Is that a thing? Are people doing that? Really? Okay. Yeah? That sounds terrible. Okay. And you had a question? Yeah. Oh, it's a good question. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sure. Yep. Yeah. So the two questions are, what is the ROI on the hotspot? How long will it take for me to get paid back my 450 US? And the second question is, you're going to be using my backhaul. Are we going to piss off the ISPs and the telcos who are funneling this data? The first question is one that I can't answer for you because our blockchain is not live yet. When the blockchain is live, the token becomes a real thing, and then when the token becomes a real thing, there's a price attached to it in the open market. We don't know what the price will be for the token. I can get into how traffic is kind of accounted for from devices to the platform, and then kind of talk about how that might amount to tokens that you end up bringing in. It's a much longer conversation. But I can't put a value on the token because it's not public. That's the short answer. Legally, I also can't just say, hey, it's a cash machine, because it's something that does real work, and it will produce a token that has some value, and on some exchanges, you'll be able to exchange it. That's the short answer. That said, our models are very aggressive. So in the first 6 to 12 months, the first people on the network will be getting paid back very aggressively. But we should talk more about that. One second. And the second question was, what's happening with the backhaul? Are we going to piss off the providers? So this model has 3 backhaul methods: Wi-Fi, Ethernet, and cellular. Future models will have cellular only. Some will have Wi-Fi and Ethernet. For cellular, we're using an actual cellular provider or an MVNO, mobile virtual network operator, on top of that, and we bundle those fees in to the cost of the hotspot. So that's taken care of. On the Ethernet and Wi-Fi side, we would view it as a good problem if the ISPs started to get upset at Helium, data passing through the network. I don't have any direct counter to how do we get around the contractual language. The amount of data being passed through a hotspot, even at a huge scale, let's say we have 100 hotspots here in Austin and 50,000 devices, it's going to be negligible, compared to the other traffic being pushed through your Wi-Fi network. So we're just kind of planning on tackling that problem as we come to it. But again, if you see things in the news about Comcast not being happy about all the hotspots using the network, we've done reasonably well, at least in the beginning. So. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah, so the smart ones want to work with us. So we've talked to everybody that might have a problem with data passing through their network as a form of backhaul. Some are very excited by the idea of helium, some view it as a crazy competitive threat, some are somewhere in between. I suspect what will happen is a few will gravitate towards us and work with us, and then others will be left in the dust. That's the supposition. A few more, and then I'll move on and we can do questions after. Sorry.
Yeah, so it sounds like your economic model then is built on how much traffic goes through the hotspot operators, right?
Not entirely. There's other mechanisms through which the hotspot operators get compensated.
So the central loss locations be out in the sticks.
Right. So early on, we will be the reward. The mining rewards will favor people who are simply deploying hotspots versus those who are routing more traffic. So that compensates for the idea that early on in the network, there's not a ton of devices actually sending things. And then further on down the road, we kind of start to move towards compensating more for device traffic versus we do for mining rewards. So we have things built into the distribution of the tokens to account for that. Yeah, so we use like 902 over in the ISM. Yeah, ISM. Yeah, so in the ISM, we'll be in the ISM globally. We're starting in the United States and Canada, so we're doing FCC and IC certification currently. And then, I don't know, what are we doing to manage the spectrum? We're doing a lot to manage the spectrum, according to the wireless guy in the back. Yeah, we can talk more about that afterwards. One more, and then I'm going to move on. Okay.
One is around, you guys heard of Nodal?
Yep.
Two, do you guys, so is helium only restricted to the routers that you sell, or do you plan to include like third-party routers or even like other IoT devices like phones?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I haven't looked at Nodal in a while. There's a handful of companies like that. There's Nodal, there's Althea, there's a couple other ones. I don't know the specifics. We don't plan on being in the hardware business for too long. So right now we make hotspots and we make modules. We will actively look to offload the production of that to manufacturers or work with companies that might build a Wi-Fi AP that happens to have the helium components built into it. So yeah, we'll move that and kind of partner with companies that can help us gain those distribution mechanisms. Cool. Okay, let's move on to some use cases. So I want to talk a bit more about what people are using the network for and what we think they're going to use the network for. And I always like to kind of bring it home with one very poignant story. So what we're really driving at here is trying to build an infrastructure layer that can be used for connected applications that were never possible before. Most of you will probably remember the Camp Fire fire that ravaged Northern California in like November of last year. So 17 days, it burned about 150,000 acres, which is over 220 square miles. 83 people died. And imagine how much that loss could have been prevented had that area in Northern California been outfitted with sensors that could have given people insight into when this was going to happen sooner. So sprinkle heat sensors over the forest. Add other mechanisms to pull data from inside of an environment like this. And then, imagine doing that on a cellular network. There were stories about how this isn't directly related to helium, but some of the first responders in this campfire situation, Verizon was throttling their data, which is just, even if it was a mistake, absolutely terrible. But in our opinion, sensors that sense wildfires should not have cellular data plans. That's not a thing that needs to happen. There needs to be a better network for this. So on the use case side, we think that one of the biggest things for helium is going to be tracking and tracing. So we think we can quickly get to a place where we can go to somebody who needs to track something and say, for an all-in cost of $2 plus pennies a year for connectivity, you can track anything where the helium network exists. So that's a big caveat, right? We have to build a network out, and if it doesn't exist yet, you can't do any tracking yet. But we think we can pretty quickly build coverage. So this tracking and tracing use case, and I'll talk about some of the implications for mobility, is where we really think we're going to shine. And our early engagements with the new network technology and our early engagements with customers, large and small, are already starting to bear this out. And we're actively building on top of the Helium platform. We haven't talked much about revenue models for Helium Inc., the business. We don't really need to get into that. But we're actively building ways to integrate all this data into ERP systems, CRM applications. We have a tracking application, which I'll show people in a bit. But I'm going to keep coming back to this tracking and tracing application because I think this is really where we're going to get a foothold. So I talked about being very excited about scooters. So scooter companies have a very big problem. They lose bikes all the time, or scooters rather, all the time. Goes for bikes as well. In the mobility space for smaller assets that are cheaper than say cars. A huge problem is that they lose these things well before their expected profitability date. So if something costs you $1,000 to put in the field and you make $100 a day and it only lasts 9 days, you're losing $100 every time that goes out into the field. So Helium is working with a few mobility providers to really help them change the game on unit economics. And so they're very excited about the idea that they can either replace, but more likely retrofit their fleet with, who's got the module in their hand that's out there floating? Oh, thank you. So that was a plant, we did that on purpose. So retrofit this onto a scooter in such a way that it's kind of hard for someone to see or pull off, and start pulling very accurate location data from that scooter past the life of the main battery on the scooter itself. So the big problem with these is that they disappear, the battery dies. There's a GPS ping from a day and a half ago. You send somebody out to find the scooter and it's gone. And that's $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 worth of inventory down the drain. So for every day that we can extend the life of one of these, we can go to a scooter company and say, hey, this scooter will be more profitable. And so all happens without a cellular data plan. It's all a retrofit, and it happens for a very cheap hardware cost and very cheap connectivity. So I'm very excited about the location capabilities. And so this is a chunk of data from one of the location tracking tests that we did a couple of weeks ago in San Francisco. Were you riding the scooter? No, you might. So, what's that? Yeah. So that's right, it does go through North Beach. So this is using the Helium network in San Francisco. So we've got a test network in San Francisco running with these. We've got, I don't know, 10 maybe, not a ton. At the time, I think we had less than 10. And we built a device that looks like what Robert's got over here, which we're going to demo in a second. And we just pulled some fantastic real-time tracking data off of a scooter. So this is a screenshot from more or less the application that we have on top of the platform that is made for location data. But this is data coming from the Helium network, no cellular involved, giving you fine-grained location, which is pretty cool. Okay, who has a pet? Anybody ever lost their pet? No? Good, excellent. So we're working with Petco and a company called CVC to build a pet tracker, location tracker. So, a very cheap, inexpensive, very kind of stylish thing that sits on a dog or a cat collar and can be made to tell you the location of your, your prized possession once, twice, 5 times a day. And why you would use Helium for this is quite simple. I mean, we don't, we're not going to require a costly cellular plan. The cost of hardware is orders of magnitude, maybe 1 order of magnitude less than what you would need for a cellular module plus a GPS. And the development experience is miles away from what you would need on there from the kind of pain you'd have to suffer on the cellular side. It is, yeah. So there's one caveat to the location. Actually, so I didn't talk about the location specifically. So let me go back to, I guess, this picture here. So this location was actually done using the Helium network, but with the GPS module on this. So the way that the location works specifically is something called TDOA, or time difference over the air. And so when we get density of these in a given geographical area. So in San Francisco, for example, when we get 50 of these, or in Austin when we get 20 or 30 of these, we can actually start to take data coming off of these. And because the software-defined radio is built such that we can pull nanosecond level timestamps off of the device, we can then triangulate or trilaterate between 2, 5, 10, 15 hotspots and get a very accurate location. So down to like 3 or 4 meters. But that's very good density, excellent saturation of the helium network. In the meantime, what we do is we still rip out the cellular network, but we put a GPS module on the back of it. So you essentially get GPS data for free off of the helium network without requiring the cellular. So it's a bit of a stopgap measure until we have the the network coverage in place to do the location. But yeah, it is essentially triangulation. Question? Spin? No, I don't know spin. Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, not skip, spin. Yeah. Cool. Cool. Yeah, we'll check them out. Okay. Yeah, thank you. We should talk. Okay. So drug companies have a very huge problem. They manufacture these expensive, very valuable, and very precious medications for terrible things like cancer. They put them in a vial, they keep it in a climate-controlled truck, and then they fire it across the country. Most of the time it makes it to its end location, which is a doctor's office or a hospital. In between, it stops at a bunch of different distribution facilities, gets on trucks, gets off trucks. Sometimes these trucks disappear. Sometimes these drugs are counterfeited and they show up somewhere else. So Helium is actively working with Capgemini, which is a big consulting company, and one of their pharmaceutical clients to build a smart cap. So they came to us and said, we have this massive problem. I've got a $5,000 unit piece of inventory. I send hundreds of thousands of these things across the country every year. I need to know where that thing is in real time. So we said, great. We could take our 13 by 13 module. We could build that into a smart cap with a very small battery. And we could put a few other sensors, temperature and tilt, essentially, to know when it's been knocked over. And we could do it for a unit cost that's in the tens of dollars, and for a data cost, which is probably 25 cents a year. So we're building that actively now. And this is a use case that would never be possible on pretty much anything else. You can't put this in cellular. I mean, the size of a GPS module itself is bigger than the entire cap. And so, back to, I think you had asked, or we were talking earlier about how the network is required for location to be possible. Obviously, the network has to be required for people to move things across the country on helium. So we're actively working with them to kind of plot a map and get their partners involved in deploying hotspots. It's kind of a common theme. People see the network as so valuable that they want to get their components of their infrastructure involved. So, we're working with a outdoor sports equipment manufacturer that's got a bunch of local retailers. They want to start tracking all of their high-value assets on helium. And they're happy to give a hotspot to their distributors that are in cities and say, hey, put this in your window. We're using it for a new application, and off we go. So we feel we can kind of build a network that way. But people are seeing this as so compelling that they want to help us build the network. And then lastly, I'm going to wrap this up here in a second. So I mentioned this company, Agulus, not your son's company, which is close to Agulus. So they build monitoring and optimization systems for non-row cropping farms. They specifically build a controller, so it's this big. It's got a bunch of sensing inputs, talks to a bunch of things in the field, and they use helium to backhaul all the data. And they set up networks, they ingest data, and then they kind of iterate on models for how the irrigation systems are supposed to work. And so this really makes really good use of helium's ability to create coverage very quickly and give them a small form factor to deploy into an environment where they don't have to touch the sensor for a while. Okay, so that's some use cases. I'm going to talk a bit about our progress and our roadmap, and then we'll kind of wrap it up. So we've had a test network running since the middle of Q4 last year, so roughly November. We've got coverage, where coverage is some number of hotspots creating coverage, in about 60 plus cities. A lot of those are in the Bay Area, and there's New York, there's Boston, there's Chicago, there's Austin, so cities like that. If you go to helium.com/waitlist, you should sign up to get on the waitlist for a hotspot. We've got over 1 million hotspots worth of waitlist interest, which is ridiculous. Helium itself as a company has done thousands of POCs to date. We were founded in 2013. We've been through every single possible deployment scenario with companies large and small, and we're pushing all this back into the platform to make it easier to build. And then Hotspot GA, we'll take this into the roadmap. So our roadmap looks like this. Sorry for the, I guess it's bigger up here. So we're launching in Austin. We love Austin. We think there's people here that want to deploy hotspots. We've got good data on that. And we actually have a lot of customers that are ready to go in Austin. And we're pushing as many pilots into Austin as we can because coverage is going to be here earlier than most cities. So everyone here is on the front of it. We will be putting early hotspots into, not from the waiting list. We've got a set number of hotspots allocated already. Yeah. You say that like it's a bad thing for an Austin local to be. Okay. So network launch here in Austin in May. The Helium blockchain mainnet is going to go live. So mainnet is basically when we kick the test network into actual production, and we really can't change much. Meaning the blockchain is running, Genesis block has been mined, things are going, and it's exciting and scary at the same time. So at that point, the Helium Atom token becomes a thing. This is back to your question about the value of kind of what ends up being captured by a hotspot operator. Then we start to see how quickly the payback periods are. We will be doing the first national hotspot sale in May as well. So focus on Austin to get the network live here to get our use cases off the ground, and then we're doing a public sale. That's when that 1 million plus waitlist quantity comes in, and we anticipate we'll sell through the first run, which is going to be in between 5,000 and 10,000 units relatively quickly. And then we also have beta customers that are being onboarded here in Austin. Robert and I were here meeting with one of our customers today that's doing in-building sensing for sound and motion for short-term real estate. And we've got a bunch of other customers that we're pushing into Austin actively. So that's May. In June, I passed around this thing. So we're going to be producing, I've got a bigger picture here. We'll have these available. So this is the Helium Feather prototyping module, this is actually shown, what's on top of there, Robert? That's so there's a GPS board on top of this. But that's the prototyping module that'll be available. And again, that just wraps the actual production wireless module, which is required. And then Q4, we do the official US network launch. So that's basically where we take all the coverage that we've produced from that hotspot sale in May and wrap it into a formal network launch. So we're roughly targeting the football cities in the United States. So if there's a football team in or kind of near a city, that's roughly where the network rollout is kind of targeted. And then we'll also start to release a bunch of the components of the network open source. So we didn't touch on this too much, but part of the real vision for this is that the network can be built and kind of grow on its own. So there'll be a foundation that manages all of the IP. So the wireless protocol, the blockchain itself, all of the schematics and the hardware for the module itself, most of the blockchain or the hotspot component. We'll start to release this in Q4, and we'll kind of continue that drumbeat. So yeah, that's all I got for you. My name is Mark. Again, this is Robert. And if you want to get on the hotspot waitlist, it's helium.com/waitlist. The white paper is whitepaper.helium.com. Don't come find me because it's not behind HTTPS. I can't help you there. That's just the white paper. GitHub.com/helium, and we've already got a bunch of code already available, specifically some of the RTOS that runs on this and some of the development kits. And then twitter.com/helium is on Twitter. So thank you very much for your time. I appreciate you coming out. So this is going to cost probably $25, and then pair that with a $400 unit. Ideally, what happens is you don't even have to buy a hotspot because unless you want to create coverage, which I hope you do, there would likely be coverage somewhere close to where you are, or in fact where you are. So,
another question: the data goes to the hotspot. Mm-hmm.
So we build what we call channels, which are hardware authenticated roots of trust from the module itself using the crypto stack on it straight into the cloud. So for something like Azure, I think they use X509 certificates for their devices. So we basically, we match the requirements of their security API. The Helium cloud infrastructure is really just encrypted data routing. So it's made to run the blockchain, and it's made to take your data, which is yours, that you own, and push it as an encrypted packet through to the cloud provider or private cloud infrastructure of your choice. So there is a routing component in between, but again, it's just there to take that encrypted data and push it into, most of the people that we work with are on AWS IoT and Google Cloud, but we're seeing more and more of Azure. But we've got channels built out for all of that connections.
Do you guys have a on the roadmap motivating like dependence on the cloud providers? Are you going to be like open and decentralized? Because
Wait, I was going to do a live demo. People want to see a live demo? Hold on. Sorry. Do we still have time? Okay. for the demo that's likely to fail. All right. So what I'm going to do here. So I have two hotspots. Hold on. So I'm going to pass this around if you want to take a look at this. So that's the hotspot. And I have on my phone the Helium wallet application. And so I also have another hotspot running on the ground over here, which we've plugged in and deployed to the network, but I haven't told anybody about yet. So what we're going to try and do is, okay, Apple TV. All right, now we go here and we screen mirror and we do, nope, oops, sorry. Austin city limits. All right, here's my phone. Let's hope my wife does not text me. Okay, so that's my daughter there, Maeve. Okay, so Helium wallet application. This is probably 85% done. So there's going to be a few bugs in it. So what I want to do first is deploy this hotspot, and then I am going to talk about what's happening. Can you hold this for me? Just tell people what's going on.
All right. Sounds good. There are pending transactions on the blockchain.
So, So this is where we, this is where you deploy the hotspot in the application. So again, I'm going to deploy this and talk through the rest of the wallet. Oh, there's my wife. Thank you, wife. Okay, so I'm going to add a hotspot to my wallet. So, so we walk you through a lot of the cool stuff here. So find a nice view for the hotspot. And is your hotspot powered on? It is. Okay, so it's powered on, and I got to press this button. Can you press the pairing button just briefly? Yep. Okay, good. All right, so he's pressed the button, and so there's a blue light that you'll see there at roughly 2 o'clock. So if it's paired, I press the pairing button. There we are. So we scan for hotspot. There we are. So B9CA, everybody's favorite MAC address. Okay, so we're going to put on the Wi-Fi network. And I happen to know the Capital Factory member password. So again, it can use Wi-Fi. So it's hack all day, hack all night. Okay. So you can use Wi-Fi, Ethernet, or cellular. So every transaction on the network requires a fee, right? So you put a hotspot on the network, you assert the location. For us, location is obviously paramount. So we have a bunch of different mechanisms through which we require you to verify the location of your hotspot, and we continue to kind of verify that. So to add a hotspot, I'm going to pay 0.0000002 atoms, and so we're going to add that. And there we are. Okay, so hotspot is added. So we're going to learn about atoms. So they're rewards. My status light is going to stay on, and now we're going to confirm location. So I'll hit this specify location button, and it's going to have me drop a pin. Does that look about right where we are? Anybody? Trinity and 8th? Give or take? Okay. So what's actually happening is we're using the phone's location to kind of piggyback and push that onto the hotspot itself. So I'm going to confirm the location. Okay, let's see what they give me for a name. So we've got this name generator We went back and forth as to whether or not we should let people pick their own names. Naming is just hard, so we decided to just go for it ourselves. So we have just rewarded ourselves with Overt Graphite Python. So it's a, it's, yeah. So, okay, so, cool.
Thank God.
Okay, so we are now confirming our location. So the thing to remember about blockchains is that they, before any transaction is official, it takes a second for it to kind of be put into a block and confirmed and push out to the network. So for us, we have about 2-minute block times currently. And so in about 2 minutes, what's going to happen is you'll see this confirmed. So if we go back over here, we've got a few things. So we've got my atoms, which these are not real. This is part of the test network. We've got a bunch of transactions. So this is the add transaction, which is pending. So nothing, really too interesting in there. But if you want to look at the details, it's there. And then I've also got the confirm location transaction also pending. I can send atoms. I can receive atoms, and do a few other things, and kind of scroll through my transaction history. So that's it. I've got all my hotspots here. I can get a nice little list. I'm the biggest fan of Vast Garnet Hornet, but we'll see who ends up being my favorite. The 87 next to the star is not a real number just yet, but that'll be your mining score or your quality score. So that'll be the score on the network that kind of puts you into the groups that are likely to be part of a certain class of rewards. It does not have a location yet because it hasn't been confirmed in the blockchain or as part of a block. There's not much activity yet in the UI. Over here, probably two things to look at. We've got the Hotspot Explorer. Actually, let me start with the Blockchain Explorer. So Blockchain Explorer will let you scroll through blocks that have already been mined and look at transactions. So we're waiting for 2849 to be mined. And once that happens, we will see all the transactions. But we can go through here. Some blocks don't have transactions. And the other thing to look at is the Hotspot Explorer. So this is going to kind of take on more prominence in the app. But these are, we're in Austin right now. So the ones that we deployed today are, I'm using Flaxen Rat and Expert Saffron Poodle. And then if we go to the search screen, we can start to see, if we go to San Francisco, for example, we have a fair amount of hotspots that are starting to show up and actually do real work. So that's a Hotspot Explorer. So I think we're still probably processing that block, but you guys get the idea, so we don't really have to sit on that. The last thing I want to show you is, now that we have this hotspot live on the network, we're going to actually put a sensor on it and get some location data. HDMI. Okay. Then we're going to X this out, and we are going to go here. Okay, so this is a application that we use internally and will eventually give to people. So I'm trying to, hold on. Oh, that almost worked. Scrolling is absurd. Are we online, Robert? There we are. All right, so that dot is a tracker that Robert is holding in his hand. And it's probably talking to the hotspot in this room, although it doesn't necessarily have to be. And if we continue to get closer, we got, let's see. So it's got a device ID. This is just all internal stuff, so it doesn't really matter. Talking to that hotspot B9CA, if you recall that MAC address. Elevation is 400 meters, give or take. RSSI may or may not be accurate. We're still kind of tuning that stuff. And then the sequence number is just an internal piece of data that we use to see how many packets are actually making it through. And then if we were to move around, although the GPS on this might be wonky enough where it thinks it's moving around, we'd start to see, sorry about the scroll here, some breadcrumbs, we call them. Let's see. Oh, all right. We might just abort at this point, but anyways. So that's a end-to-end tracking application working on top of Helium. Location sensor here, hotspot there, and before that, that was the wallet for deployment. So yeah, all right, I'm officially done. Thanks. Fire away.
Okay, so my first question is,
Sure. So the first question was, what is the throughput of the end node, or what's the effective throughput of the wireless protocol that we're using? So I think if you maxed out the data rate from the device to a hotspot, you'd get about 40 kbits a second. Most people that we talk to weren't really going anywhere near that amount of data. So we tend to see people closer to like 5 to 10 is kind of what they could be pushing for an application. Robert can go into all the symbol rate specifics and what there's a big trade-off between how far you want to send data and thank you, and how much data you want to send. But think 10 kbits a second plus minus is something that's pretty comfortable. How often you want to send data is entirely up to you. Function of your battery life, but more so the sensor program that you're actually sending. So in that vial of tracking example I gave with Capgemini, they're planning to send 2 times a day. They just want to know what. Yeah, that's it's high. I don't know why you'd. I guess if you're an athlete and you're moving quickly, you might want to know that. So may or may not be the best fit for us. But certainly, the radio is capable of doing that. Although, yeah, whether or not that's the best use of our, of helium, who knows? So the number that we quote for this is we talk more about number of packets per hour that can be pushed through it. So if you're pushing, say, 20 byte packets, we can do like 300,000 device packets per hour. And that number kind of goes up and down depending on how big the effective packet is. We don't actually have a capped message size. So if you want to send something that's 600 bytes or 1.2 megs, we'll just break it up on the module side and then reassemble it on the other side. Raj. Oh, cool. Don't forget to tell. Sorry, Pete, our creative designer, supplies us with new fonts and font. Yeah. So expect to see it in like the May timeframe. Right now we're using Test Flight for all the app stuff, and then Hockey app for the Android stuff, which is terrible. But yeah, so May roughly, I would expect it to be public. Oh yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure what the answer is to the vertical thing. It's more, I mean, if there's coverage, it'll work. You were seeing that number because it was coming off of the GPS. So, I mean, many thousands of feet. I mean, if there's coverage that can extend up to where the thing is transmitting from, it'll get captured. Well, sure. The price thing is interesting. So if you want to just buy a raw helium module and build something around it, which I suspect you might want to do because you like to build those things, at scale, that's going to cost like $5, $4. If you want to build something or acquire something that's more packaged, I wouldn't be surprised if in too long there were a few companies building something packaged that you could just take and, like a tile that actually works essentially. Something like that. The price on that could be variable, but if it was more than, $20+, I'd be very surprised. We likely won't build. We're not really targeting that at this point. We get asked that question a lot, but it's not anything that's on our near-term roadmap. Yeah. David. Sure. What aspect of the security specifically? Are you talking more about the network security, or getting devices on the network, encrypting data, that sort of thing? Sure. So we were talking earlier before about the utility of the Helium cloud and why it's there, or the cloud infrastructure rather. So all the data in flight is encrypted. So if you generate a sensor reading on a module or on a sensor in the middle of a field, we encrypt that using the private key of the device itself. You as a developer are more than welcome to encrypt it again. So some people wrap another layer of encryption on top of it. And so that encrypted packet is sent back across the network, the contents of which are never seen by the hotspot. And then it just gets pushed into your cloud layer where it is decrypted using the methods that your cloud requires. So that's how the data is kind of encrypted and pushed to the network. Every device that's on the network has a private key that's only known to it. There's a chip. What's on the 1352? What is the? Yeah, so the module itself has a way to generate and manage private keys. And again, it's in such a way where no one besides the module itself has ever seen these things. And so we can work with companies to deploy modules in large numbers, but when they hit the field, the private key already exists on the device. It hasn't been sent across the network, and it's never seen by anybody besides the module itself. Yeah. Yeah. Please. Yeah, the short answer is we will probably get there. We had been focused on the small data problem for 5 years. We still think no one solved it. The larger story that we tell about the blockchain and the incentive model built around the blockchain is that it can be used to incentivize the building of other networks. So Wi-Fi networks, 5G networks, or Trump's 6G network, that use the Helium blockchain as the incentivization mechanism. So it's not that we don't care about that. Also, 5G specifically, I think the carriers are going to be fumbling around for the next 5 to 10 years, and whatever, they might skip over it and end up with something else totally different. So, yeah, it's on our roadmap. It's the longer arc of what we're doing, but we think that the incentivization model and the Helium blockchain can tie that sort of progress together. Sure. Yep. Yeah, and so you can, and there's, I think, is Nodal doing that? Are they doing the Wi-Fi thing? Yeah. With who? Okay. Yeah. So there's 4 to 5, 6 companies out there that are claiming to kind of do crowdsourced Wi-Fi. I don't think most of them are actually very effective. There was a company called FON, F-O-N, which did this in Europe a while ago. They actually did relatively well, but I think what they lacked was this incentivization mechanism. Like, why am I going to share my Wi-Fi? So there's some other companies that are kind of trying to bolt on the crypto payment method for people sharing Wi-Fi. We thought really long and hard about why we needed the blockchain to do this, and ultimately decided it was necessary. But we agree. We think people, there's an appetite for that. Absolutely. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've not. So that's a good question. We've not talked to Austin specifically. We're happy to talk to cities and be part of larger smart city initiatives. Cities tend to take a longer time to do things, and as a startup, with 30 people, we have trouble focusing on that. Mm-hmm. We're not yet. No, we'd love to. Yeah, let's talk about that. How long do we have here? Okay, just checking. Go ahead. Yeah. Yeah, so it is there for more reasons than just incentivization. So it lets us do things like, produce something useful and push it back into the network in the form of this proof of coverage. We also use that proof of coverage to do proof of location. So after we verify that a hotspot is actually where it says it is, at a geographic lat long, and we know that it's there over time and is doing good things, and we know that its geographic peers are doing good things, we can then take that and push it out onto the devices essentially and guarantee that their location data is accurate, because we know that the hotspots are accurate, and we only get that because of the blockchain. We also get things like microtransactions. So we didn't talk about how you actually pay for traffic, but it's a unit called a data credit. But the data credit is per packet. So whereas with a cellular provider, you're paying $2, $3, $4, $5 a month, or if you really negotiate well, maybe 75 cents a month and then some overage for each megabyte. With Helium, you're literally paying a very small fixed fee per packet. So not only can you project the cost of your application to a penny over time, but back to the vial tracking example, if I'm only sending 2 packets a month, I can know that it's only going to cost me, 2 times whatever, or 2 packets a day, 2 times 24 times however many days in the year. And that's perfect. So that the blockchain gives us that. So that plus the token gives us that ability. Yeah. So we have two units on the network. There's the token, the native token that's native to the protocol itself, which is produced on a set schedule via mining. And then there's something called a data credit. So enterprises spend data credits to send traffic across the network. So has anybody ever used Twilio? Yeah. So in Twilio, your credit card is constantly re-upping. Every time you drop below a certain level, you're spending money. AWS has compute credits, similar to that kind of thing. Or Azure has something that does compute credits. You buy a basket of these things, and then you apply them towards your usage in the future. So we're doing the similar thing with a data credit. So we peg it to a very small portion of a penny. So I think the current peg, and this could change, is like 5/10,000ths of a penny, so extremely small. And so the token converts into data credit. So let's say you wanted to send 1,000 packets, and the packet cost one data credit was a penny. That would essentially end up being $10 to send all those packets. And so the network and the blockchain produces those data credits from the token itself. But as an enterprise, you don't see anything besides data credits. So you're paying for traffic per packet in a thing called a data credit, which enterprises are familiar with from usage of things like AWS. In the white paper, that's not how we describe it. So we've changed that mechanism due to a bunch of different things, one of which was enterprises saying, hey, I'm already getting crazy enough looking at the blockchain, but now you're telling me I have to go buy this thing called a token, and I have to hold it. My accounting department's going to kill me. So that's where the data credit came from, and it's actually a really elegant way to do it. Anything else? How are we doing? Cool. Okay. Well, I'll quit it there, and we can talk offline. But thank you again for coming. This has been fantastic, and thank you again to Darren and David. Thanks, guys. Cool.